Good day, everyone. My name is Nordy Grace Mercado, and I'm the Asia Regional Director of 350.org. I will be moderating today's panel. It's been more than 20 months since the pandemic happened, and for some countries like the Philippines and other countries here in Asia, we have been on lockdown and restrictions for more than 18 months and counting. Last year, when the pandemic started, we said that during this pause, we need to reflect and rethink how we view sustainability, how to reimagine a future which is just and equitable, and how to aspire for a world that is not only pro planet, but definitely pro people. We are still in the pandemic. However, even as in the present, we are fighting for equitable access to public health and governance. We must continue to build an aspirational future. This afternoon, in the fourth plenary session of the Asia Solidarity Lab, we have the honor of listening and conversing with four activists and visionaries on their views, hopes, and aspirations on how to build back better in solidarity, genuine solutions towards a just recovery. Our first panelist is Jerry Winata. Jerry spent a big part of his professional career in development work in Indonesia, ranging from lifting people out of poverty with the World Bank to improving the nutrition of impoverished children and pregnant mothers with the United Nations World Food Program. Before joining Anambas Foundation, where he currently oversees all of their activities and programs, Jerry got an opportunity to consult major corporations in Indonesia to strengthen their sustainability strategy, make their practices safer for the environment, and in line with the government of Indonesia's ambition to reduce its carbon emission. Next, we have Zian Rigavara. Zian is a national coordinator of youth advocates for Climate Action Philippines, or YACAP, which is an alliance of various individuals, youth formations, and student councils advocating for immediate climate action and climate justice. His work focuses on grassroots organizing, campaign executions, and external relations with various local and international organizations for partnerships and collaborations. As a full-time activist with a BS Physics background, he dedicates his time in advocating for science and technology that serves the people. Now, up close is a colleague of mine, a good friend, Vidya Dinker. Vidya lives in a coastal town in South India and is a social and environmental activist actively engaged in standing up for the rights of women and minorities. She has spent years fighting deprivation and land grab backed by the powerful and the elite and the state. In response to plans of turning her region into a giant petrochemical hub, she initiated the resistance of individuals, farmers, trade unions, and the civil society organizations that successfully blocked the project. Over a year ago, Vidya initiated Growth Watch, which is an action research group. She is also the national president of the Indian Social Action Forum, or INSAF, a platform of member organizations and movements across 15 Indian states. And she's also an active member of the NGO Forum and ADB. And last but not the least is Aruba Farouk. Aruba is a 15-year-old climate and environmental activist from Bangladesh. In December, Aruba became the youngest yet ambassador for Conscience Land, a positive pro-planet organization. In March 2021, after having a brainstorm, the then 14-year-old climate and human rights activist became the youngest Bangladeshi citizen to petition the national government. The petition asks for urgent action to phase out fossil fuels and adopt renewable energy and to infuse public school classrooms at all levels with quality climate education. Aruba, who also values human rights, has advocated on behalf of Rohingyas who were forced to flee their homeland in nearby Burma for refuge in Bangladesh. Welcome, dear panelists, and I'm really excited to have this conversation with all of you. For our opening question, we turn to Vidya. Vidya, while our conversation today is focused on solutions, it's also important that we anchor these solutions to the context of the present. What do the intersecting crises of climate, and COVID look like, especially for communities and local groups? And why should we be wary of the false solutions that are being presented to us?
Good question. Hi, Norley. If you think about where I am in India, this year has been inspiring at one level, because it's almost a year that our farmers have been sort of, they've encircled the corridors of power, the capital city of India, and they have stuck it out. Through COVID, through the lockdowns, they did not go away, they did not shy away from standing firm and seeking justice, seeking the 3 farm laws to be revoked. And they really sat on the chest of the government and said, we are not going, we are staying, and you have to listen to us. The government tried some kind of talk, then largely ignored them. And yet, the farmers have been absolutely inspirational in just sitting there and saying we're going nowhere until we get what we have come for. So our capital city is besieged by the people who have fed us all these years, and they are wanting to be heard, and now they're being heard across the world. The Indian government, of course, listens more keenly to corporates like Adani and Ambani. So we call it the Adani Ambani Sarkar, which is like, the government. So we have this kind of incongruous kind of thing where there's an inspiring Occupy and surround Delhi kind of protest, and the COVID pandemic, where people have lost their loved ones. Every family has lost someone, and the government is definitely to blame for this, and is just not owning up to its responsibility. So we have this. Where I live, Norley, I live in coastal Karnataka. That's a southern state in India, and on the Arabian Sea. If you see, people in our region had never actually experienced any kind of extreme weather event. And it was the Bay of Bengal, the other side of India, Bangladesh, India, Aruba is going also there, that used to have more of these extreme weather events. You would have landfalls of cyclones or typhoons, about 2-3 a year. Suddenly, the numbers, even on the east coast of India, has gone up tremendously. So landfalls have increased to 6-7 a year. People are grappling with this all the time. And during a pandemic, also, we have all kinds of things that make them run helter-skelter even more and destroy lives. In our coast, which was really a very protected kind of coast, we have suddenly we have these extreme weather events that we are not used to. So our fishermen and the fishing community that was so dependent on what the sea would give. So the sea is also behaving differently. So they're literally following the fish. The fish are going elsewhere. The fishermen are following them. Long days out at sea, not sure of catch anymore, coming back with less, all of that. And at the same time, there are cyclones and a lot of rain. So suddenly they are asked not to go out to sea. But who is compensating them for the amount of days that they are not able to fish anymore? So I think all sectors, whether it's agriculture, and we know that just repeal of the 3 farm laws will not solve the problem. You need long-term vision and a whole land reform to take place so that Indian agriculture is supported. But all the allied sector, fisheries, poultry, horticulture, a lot of the women, and women, of course, are so crucial to climate justice. A lot of the women in my area grow jasmine flowers, and that is the way that they sustain themselves and their family. All of this has really come undone because of the climate crisis. And why are we not stepping up the ante? why not for the climate crisis? When the government can campaign so much for the COVID crisis, can say, we will do this, we will do that. Every call that you try and pick up and call a friend or family, you can hear the government saying, oh, be careful, wear your mask, vaccination. Why are we not finding that kind of commitment and zeal in the powers to be to tackle the climate crisis? Because really, this is the bigger crisis, which is, affecting our lives, our livelihoods. We have farmers who might lose crops. In heavy rainfall in our area, for example, Norley, and farmers might lose their crop. The government may step in for some kind of insurance. But what about the degradation of the land after like an extreme weather event? So that means for year upon year, farmers and farming families are really trying to make do with the land and not being able to make do. And that pushes them into our cities even more. And we know that the fossil fuel driven society that we have built until now is not working. We are talking of building back better, but are we really thinking of something other than a fossil fuel driven city centric kind of lifestyle? So that's where we need to think out of the box. I think I'll go to what Arundhati Roy, one of the best writers from my region, said when she was asked about these multiple crises of climate breakdown, ecological collapse, and really the marginalization of so many of our people. She said that one of her books was dedicated to those who have learned to divorce hope from reason. So being unreasonable is the only way we can, to have hope. So in this situation of despair and crisis, multiple crises, I think India and the world and all climate activists need this kind of unreasonable hope. Where we cannot afford any kind of pessimism. We have to be optimistic. We have to show in small areas what can be done. We have to steer clear of the same fossil fuel based solutions, and we have to think differently. We have to be outliers. We have to reject. So every time there's an extreme weather event, they'll say, oh, insurance, and then the foreign insurers will come in. No. That's not the solution. We need public state-backed solutions that are hashed out with us. And I think we have the responsibility as climate activists, of people who work with people, to bring those solutions forth and push our governments like the farmers are doing right now in Delhi to listen to us, to not look away, and to do what is necessary.
Thank you very much, Vidya. That is so beautiful. We need to have unreasonable hope for us to achieve what we have been fighting for and what we have been hoping for. Thank you for bringing into light that the bigger crisis is not just the COVID, but also, of course, the climate crisis. We'll get back to you for more insights later. But for Zian, talking about solutions and building back better, and in your capacity as a youth organizer in the Philippines, and also having have worked with other activists from other countries, what role can the youth play in building back better, or on having this unreasonable hope and vision, especially in the light of the IPCC report, which has just been released recently? Ian?
All right. Thank you so much, Norley. And yes, I would like to jump off from what you said about the IPCC report, because it's actually saddening. It's alarming. It's saddening. It's everything rolled up into one package, wherein if you read it, you're not gonna be happy about it. But okay, we have to go back to what Vidya has mentioned. We need to have hope. We need to have unreasonable hope, because if we just drown ourselves with the, oh no, this is gonna happen, that is gonna happen, but we can still do something about it. And even if, okay, I don't want to be pessimistic here, but even if the world is really going to end, we can still do something to kind of extend the lifetime of the earth. Okay, so why not do that? And it's not just on us, but it's also for the future generations. And us being the youth, we would stay in this earth for quite a longer period of time. And we would also want to think about our children and our children's children. We owe it to them to, actually do something right now. Because if we don't, then we're gonna see the reality of the IPCC report. Like all the things there about this might happen, that might happen in 1.5, in 2 degrees. We will absolutely see it if we don't do anything right now. But let me go back a little bit first to the Build Back Better idea. Right now, we are very familiar with the idea of COVID because it's the thing that we are experiencing, everyone is experiencing. Well, the climate crisis, we are all experiencing it too. Some people do not absolutely feel it. For example, me as a person, I know that the Philippines has around 20 storms in a year, and these storms are really, really powerful. But me being in the city center, the most like devastating thing for me is I don't have Wi-Fi, I don't have electricity, and that's not devastating at all. Comparing it to the people in the front lines, in the countryside, the farmers, the fisher folk, wherein their lives are dependent on the environment, and their livelihoods are being destroyed. But the COVID crisis, it's an eye opener for everyone because everyone is affected with the lockdowns. So for me, I can't go out, I can't go to shopping and see my friends. All these petty things that I used to have before, they're not here. That means I feel it too. Okay. So with the COVID lockdowns being more understandable to everyone, we need to think about building back better from COVID and then apply that to climate. So for example, for COVID, we have seen lockdowns upon lockdowns upon lockdowns, and especially for Asian countries. I don't know why, but Asian countries really like lockdowns. Like, if there's a surge, it's automatic lockdowns. And I'm not saying that lockdowns are bad, but lockdowns without any proper testing and tracing together with it, it's not going to solve the problem. We're going to have another lockdown once another surge happens. So we're not going anywhere further with solving the COVID-19 crisis because we are just automatically going back to the idea of lockdowns. And because of the lockdowns, of course, the government would want to, stimulate the economy once the lockdown is, lessened or opened. But the sad thing is, because we want to stimulate the economy, the governments, I can speak for the Philippines, for example, the Philippine government has been pushing for ugly. I don't have any better term for it, but it's really ugly and sorry for the term, but it's stupid because these projects or economic stimulus packages includes mining, reclamation, fossil fuels. So, these are things that we already know are bad for the environment, but still these are the things that they're pushing to stimulate the economy. So, when we talk about transforming the recovery from the COVID-19 crisis to the climate crisis, we need to think about what we can do to actually stop the problem. So, for example, when we talk about fossil fuels, we need to stop fossil fuels and then switch it into renewable energy instead of just pushing for renewable energy without phasing out the fossil fuels. Because if you do that, you're still not, you're still not addressing the problem of there's still more and more carbon emissions from the fossil fuels. When we talk about food security, yes, we can have agricultural technology, all of these advancement in science to make our food, safer, like food security safer. But okay, if these agricultural technologies still belong to the capitalists and they, jack up the prices because, these are genetically modified crops that withstand the extreme heat and extreme weather events, it's not going to be good for anyone. It's not going to be pro people if it's still just, serving a few. So when we talk about solutions and when we talk about building back better, these are the things that we want. And going back to the main gist of the question is what can we do as youth? Because I basically laid out, okay, what we want. Now it's on us to demand this to the governments, to the people in power. Because yes, we can do reduce, reuse, recycle. We can do, turning off the lights, turning off the water, and these are not bad things. But if you just stick to those without actually demanding, the systemic changes from your governments, then sad to say, but we might see the 1.5, the 2 degrees, or even more on the IPCC report. Those effects, we might see that. So, it's on us right now to continue talking about it, inform other people, then unite with one another. So this is a good example. You talk to other activists, you communicate with them, think about solutions together, and then, act on it. So submit petitions, have protests. Protesting isn't bad, okay? So it's a form of struggle wherein you would tell your governments directly that, hey, these are the things that we want and these are the things that we actually need. It's not just me wanting it for petty reasons. These are actually the things that we need for the survival of the planet. So
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sian. And that is really a great advice, especially for the youth. We have to continue to demand. We should not stop demanding. We should continue to amplify our voices. That's a really, really good advice for everyone. And also, I like what you said about, we need to have a systemic change. That is precisely what we need to do, because the problem of COVID and also climate change is a systemic problem. And we cannot have, very band-aid, very minor solutions or band-aid solutions for that. We really need a systems change. And thank you for reminding us, not just the youth, that we have to always have our voice heard, to link up with other people, and to use our rights to protest, to demand, and to really speak up. So thank you very much, Sian. We'll get back to you more later on. Now for Jerry. Jerry, in your experience as a consultant working with foundations and also helping corporations better their service and their framework in order to serve the people as well, what would you say the communities that you have worked with especially have been doing in the name of building back better and creating pathways towards a just recovery? And maybe a follow-up question there is, who should we look for guidance based on your experience in Indonesia?
Well, thank you so much for the opportunity. I think it's a massive question, right? It's a massive question, especially in times of full uncertainties. I'm not trying to compete who's more pessimistic among the panelists, because it seems like we do have our frustrations and it's justified, right? And in my country, in Indonesia, we have our own share of frustration. And what do our communities have been doing? A lot and nothing at all at the same time. I think this crisis, we have been doing a whole lot of things out of survival, out of desperation, out of priorities, but to build back better, because then at the moment, the general feeling that I personally feel working with grassroots level communities as well as businesses, the general feeling is they're surviving, they're not thriving, and even in the best of time, when we were thriving, we're not doing the right thing. We're still struggling to do the right, and that's at the best of time. And we are faced in the unprecedented crisis right now, where people are surviving and they're just grasping. Now, how do we try to kind of come out of this and build better? It's a massive question. I think the operative word in your opening remarks, Norley, is aspirational. Like how, because to be honest, we didn't have a just growth in the best of time. So all we can do is trying to imagine what is that just growth feels like or look like, because we don't have the examples, especially not in Indonesia. We have a massive sort of like inequalities in economic equalities. I think it's very similar to the Philippines, amongst other things, gender equality and so on and so forth. But it's not all bad news. I think like Vidya also mentioned about some inspirational things that has come out of COVID. I think, what COVID has done globally, I think, but most certainly in Indonesia, is sort of like put everyone on the same boat, or put everyone on the same level, on the same weather. We're weathering the same storm. We are in different boats though. Some are in a wooden boat, some on a yacht, but we are weathering the same storm. We cannot leave the boat. whatever the boat looks like. So I think that's what we've been put in, right? And inspirational bits and pieces have came out of it. For example, I work with the community in the most remote area in Indonesia, in the small remote island communities. It's in the border of in the middle of South China Sea, in the middle of nowhere, in the border of Indonesian water. So typically, we that kind of community receive the least amount of support, purely due to geographical location, right? We have 270 million people in Indonesia, spread across, like in the Philippines, your archipelago, spread across 19,000 islands, right? So it is, I mean, let's not take away the geographical challenges that the nation face. But that's not an excuse. But typically, that will be the reason the communities I work with, which is one of the most remote communities in Indonesia, will suffer more and also receiving less support. But guess what? During this pandemic, we, the community, have received vaccines earlier than most people. So, like I said, this pandemic really turns things on its head. Communities like us, outside, on the outskirts of Indonesia, in the middle of nowhere, and yet we get attention, because of the severity of this pandemic and the needs of survival. So it's not all bad. So I guess if they can, but again, human minds are fickle. Human beings are fickle. We can only see things that immediate threat to us, but we cannot see the bigger threat. Vidya have clearly pointed out that climate crisis is much bigger and much more severe to our existence, to our survival. But COVID is right in front of our eyes. Everything else doesn't matter. So what I hope we can get out of this is that we can take some learnings. Again, humans are fickle, so we need to take that into consideration. But I hope that this can be a good lesson learned for all of us, that if we got together and can actually sort of like focus on looking at everyone facing the one issue together. Yes, we might be on different boats. We are weathering the same storm, and there's a solution, and there's prioritization. Like maybe those in the wooden boats might die first, and those in the yacht might survive a bit longer. So you might be able to put sort of like, who to help first, triage. So if we can do that with COVID, I'm sure we can do that with climate crisis. It's easier said than done, but like Sian said, there's hope. And even to prolong the life of our planet a bit longer, it's worth it. I'm not sure how helpful that is, but that's all I got.
It is very helpful, Jerry, because you've just given us a very, very good reminder that we are in the same storm. We are weathering the same storm, but we are on different boats. Some are small, some are big, some are, some are metal, some are plastic or even wooden, and that would depend greatly our survival on, right, where we are in this pandemic and in this climate crisis. So thank you very much for that reminder. And also, I like the tone of this panel, and I think this is really what we were expecting, to have for this panel to have a more hopeful tone, because that is what we need to have, right, in order for us to have a more hopeful, a more inspirational, and as a more aspirational future. And I think we need to think of that even if we are in the middle of the climate crisis and the pandemic. This question is for Vidya and Jerry. We were talking about aspiration, inspiration, and some visions. Can you, in your line of work, can you give concrete examples and ideas on how we can achieve the future that we want in terms of COVID and climate crisis? Who'd like to go first?
Okay. What I noticed during COVID is that all of us in the city, all us city dwellers, were so scared. We were locked up in our homes, etc. And all my friends who happened to be in farming households were moving around, continuing their work, and life was pretty much as usual, unless they needed to come into the city to get something. Then it was a problem. So, but they're self-sufficient, and life went on beautifully well. So I think, as I said before, I really think that because we have this kind of extractive economy, which pushes people into the cities and is fossil fuel based, that everything gets exacerbated. And I think if we will allow our communities to be more connected with the land, and work in collectives, in cooperatives, and also work with decentralized distribution systems, whether it's energy systems, food systems, everything that is needed. If it's decentralized, even governance systems, very important that they are also decentralized, then we have something. So we must definitely be part of an initiative or part of this building back better, but in a completely different way than the rest of the world is talking, how the US is pushing through. We need to be part of building a different non-city centric, non-fuel, fossil fuel based society and economy. We need to break out of this business as usual box. And quite frankly, despite COVID, I do not think the West is actually breaking out of that BAU box. So we really need to tell them straight out that it has to be zero. It's an ancient number. And somehow, I think the West doesn't understand the concept of zero well enough. So they have all these fancy net zero jargon that they're throwing at all of us. And that's not acceptable. It has to be real zero. It has to be just zero. It has to be zero, period. So that's something. And then I think it's also quite funny how the UNFCCC, as an institution, they brought about the GCF, right? The Green Climate Fund, which they are pushing like for adaptation, mitigation. It's supposed to support it, loss and damage also. But now it's like the World Bank that is the secretariat for the GCF. How ridiculous is that? This is why I said we cannot go with the old plan. We need to think out of the box. Here, the climate crisis is an opportunity for bigger and greater fields of business for the IFIs, for even US. Even COP26 does not hold real promise unless it's more rooted in what people want, not what governments are pushing, not what corporates are pushing. And I think in the whole climate justice sphere, we need to put women in the center of it. Norley, it's so important. In South Asia, I may be fortunate. I can speak my mind. I can walk out of my house. But even now, I'm going to be 50 in 2 months. My father will still ask me, where are you going? Why are you going? It's late night. So you do not even have basic freedoms. You cannot marry who you please. It's not just your parents. It'll be the whole society questioning you if you happen to fall in love and marry a Muslim. So we can't exercise basic freedoms. Can't even choose our partners. And it's an internalized framework for most of our girls that all household care work, tending to the family is my responsibility. Now, these everyday oppressions of women are exacerbated by climate emergency. And it plays out in women's lives and in our region so much more keenly. And I think as we all struggle for basic needs, we see women caught in this vicious death cycle where just one climate event will see that they are pushed into taking one loan after the other, even if the husband. So it's interesting, you hardly find a woman committing suicide. So an unemployed youth is committing suicide today. A farmer in debt who is a male farmer may commit suicide, but the woman struggles and keeps on going. So I think even to find solutions to the climate crisis, we need to center it in our women. They are going to show us the way. They are the ones who know how to manage all crisis, whether it's a personal crisis, it's a household crisis, it's a larger national crisis or beyond. Unfortunately, of course, climate crisis means that it doesn't know national boundaries or state boundaries or even family boundaries. It is, as Jerry so eloquently put it, we are all weathering the storm in some boat or the other. But I think if we give women, make them captain of the ship, then we shall have some real change. That's my simple solution. Make women go up front and take charge.
Thank you, Vidya. Jerry?
Well, I can't agree more with Vidya. I mean, look at during this whole crisis, pandemic, COVID pandemic, all the nations that are led by women are doing so much better globally, hands down. So there's no argument on what Vidya is proposing. Yes, now. So I'm going to veer away a little bit from climate crisis and sort of like take examples of what I'm sort of witnessing personally in the community that I'm working with. I think this COVID also highlighted some of the crucial injustice in regards to development, or for example, you know, during the lockdown, everyone have to, especially school children, they have to stay at home and learn from home. And it highlighted the broken communication infrastructure for some of the places in Indonesia. Only then people take notice the inequality of access to information and access to technology and access to infrastructure. I mean, it's not a new thing. That's the crazy part. Everybody knows about it. But like I said, human can't process things that's too far ahead. But as soon as there's a wrench thrown in, and then we all need internet, like that's become a basic necessity. It's no longer luxury. It's basic necessity. And this is how the world is going to go. Even after COVID, post-COVID, this is the new norm. Working remotely, studying remotely will just be, will be here long after COVID gone. But the problem is not everyone have access to it. And this has opened up the eyes of the government, for example, to put priorities and sort of like understand better there are those people who are weathering the storm on a boat, on a wooden boat, needs help more urgent than others. As, for example, access to internet and technology. And the crazy part is like some community members in where I work, they're wealthy. And yet they couldn't have access to information and internet because of the poor infrastructure. It's not so much about the wealth, but also distribution and prioritization of development priorities. So this has been highlighted so much. So that's one. The second one that I can see from this COVID is that I've been working with the community directly on waste management, especially waste management for small island communities. As you can imagine, the amount of single-use products during COVID grown exponentially. So this have also opened up the eyes of the communities like, oh my God, is no joke. Like their behavior started to shift. Well, they see piles and piles of single-use products being washed up to the shore 10 times more than it used to be. So I think that sort of like open up the eyes of the people, and they start becoming creative about it. So I think talking about creating pathways, we should take this opportunity to sort of like invest in, you know, proper waste management, invest in creativity on how to reuse and repurpose the waste and create something that is economically benefiting the community. creating more proper waste management centers. Let the community runs it. So that's kind of like what my foundation is doing, is creating this community-based waste management centers that is economically beneficial to the communities. But now they see the value in it. And also the way that we do businesses have changed significantly. For example, a physical market has become less relevant. People now, the small and medium enterprises are entering digital era where everybody's selling things online. So again, it highlighted the needs of improved information and communication system, but also to shift the way we think on how to make money in a different way and invest in that. It doesn't require any more massive sort of like markets and things like that. So I think the way people do trade and the way people do business have shifted. And we should capitalize this sort of new change to also address the climate crisis. Yes, it will have sort of the double-edged sword, even though we're using less sort of like marketplace and blah, 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 less offices, less traveling for work with airlines, but obviously logistics will increase. So how can we also capitalize the needs for movement for goods and services, and using smart technology, now that everything is on the up and up, using smart technology and sort of like more environmentally friendly ways to do this? Because otherwise, the low income community and the small medium enterprise will flourish because of the introduction of digital market. But it could also mean the devastating impact of the planet because of the logistics that's required, and also the packaging that's required to send these goods and services. So I think we need to sort of like ensure that we benefiting one doesn't mean destroying the others. It's a tall order. I don't think we have the solutions right now, but I think it's good that we have the time during our lockdown to think about it. All we have is time, so maybe lockdown is not such a bad thing. We can use it in a productive way, as frustrating as it is.
Lydia and Jerry are coming from two different perspectives, but I've seen some really, really similar things that they have mentioned. Number one is the role of women. Definitely, we have to ensure that moving forward to the future, women must take a front seat. And we have to put women at the heart of everything we do, make them captain of the ship. Another thing that they both mentioned is that we were not actually doing a great job during the best of times, as Jerry was mentioning earlier. So now that we are in the worst of times, we have to make sure that we reimagine so that we will not go back to where we were even before the pandemic or the climate crisis. They were also both talking about access to services and the inequity of all of it, and that we need to prioritize and make sure that those who are most vulnerable, most marginalized, and inaccessible are reached and are given services. So thank you very much to you both. One more thing that you both mentioned is not to do business as usual. We have to reimagine how we do business, and that this can be business which are not big, which are not necessarily global or transnational. This can be community run, as Jerry was saying, and community based and community led. Okay, so let's go to the next question. Hi Aruba, as a young activist in Bangladesh, what is your vision of a better world? And what do you demand from our leaders, from the private sector or corporations and the communities?
Well, I think I was just like 13 years old when I started believing the climate crisis. There was a piece of scientific fact but as an emergency. And since then, I mean, whenever I have actually closed my eyes and thought about this crisis, I mean, I have always imagined a very bleak and bleak and dire reality. And my generation whole future is just in the front lines of this crisis. Uh, Unfortunately, we are the most unluckiest ones in this crisis, which who are from Bangladesh, the seventh most vulnerable country to the climate crisis. As a young person, my demands are just to the world leaders just die with climate justice, having the climate and environmental justice as a priority, and act behind the science. Also, when it comes like my vision about what kind of future I want to have, the answer could be like just green world, just clean, safe, and a justified world where we have everyone has equal rights and everyone has a nice future where we can drink water that is not polluted with plastic and industrial waste. We can breathe in air which is not polluted with fossil fuels in the street. And for the climate justice, we don't have much time, and that's right, but we still hope. And that hope comes from our actions, the action from our world leaders, the action from our communities, the action from people from all the sectors of the world. In the communities, I say that in case of the communities, I say that just adapting to the climate crisis and do as much as we from every generation can, like the young people can actually take part in the climate movement and making it more stronger and bolder and being a voice for their own future. The adults can just support us, they can change their lifetime. And if they are working on the sectors that are polluting, like in the fashion industry or like in the fossil fuel industry, just spread that out and to help us make the real change in our world and our community and for our planet, because this is the only planet we have, and this is the only and the adult generation is the only generation that is the first generation to have the opportunity, to have the ability to tackle this crisis, because what this generation does now, my generation cannot undo. This is the last chance our world leaders have to do something and just to like act on its signs. I mean, everything is just very crystal clear. We have everything in front of us. What do you have to do? And the last thing, and what the world leaders have to do is read them with this actual emergency. Because this is not how the things will go. This is not how the things should be. How the things should be is what the science says. And just the world leaders to act what they have to do, and they have their responsibility. I don't know if I have left out anything else.
Thank you very much. That's excellent. That's super, Aruba. And thank you for reminding us that this is the last chance that we have, and that we really should be working together, both the adults and the youth, in order to solve this solution. And thank you for mentioning, and we have been mentioning in this panel since the beginning, that we should have hope. And thank you for letting us know that your hope comes from the actions of the youth, of the people, of the community. So thank you very much for reminding us that. And now talking about intergenerational work between the youth and the adults, Sian, do you have any suggestions on how we can do this?
Right. So for intergenerational responsibility and tackling the issue together, one thing that we have to take note of is that whoever is leading this is usually white, old, global north person. Okay. So one thing is like the male versus the female thing, which the previous speakers have already mentioned. But what about the old versus the young? where is the youth voice when we are talking about solutions? Okay, and when it comes to the climate crisis, we are the ones who, will experience this for a longer period of time. We're not saying that the older generation would not feel it. No, because we are already experiencing the climate crisis right now. But in terms of time, the younger generations would be experiencing this longer. So that means for us, we have to, be at the front lines as well when we talk about solutions, because if we don't, we're basically giving our future to them. We are giving away the future of the younger generations. We are giving away, you know, all the possible things that can be to them. And if we go back to just the idea of they're gonna live here like this amount of time, and we're gonna live here for this amount of time, you know, uh, for this amount of time we are in this together. But for the latter part, it's all on us now. And what about the younger generations? That's why we need to start thinking about the role of the youth when it comes to addressing the climate crisis and other issues in general.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Cian. That's very well put. We really have to put the youth voice in talking about solutions, in talking about a better future, because definitely you and the future generation will be the one who will be left in this world that we are living in. So you should definitely be in the conversation. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you very much for this panel. I really hope that we had more time to talk about solutions, to talk about experiences in your own fields and the work that all the inspirational work that you're doing. With that, with all the hopes and the ideas and the suggestions and the inspiring stories that you have, we will now close this session. I'm thanking each and every one of you because we really had a very dynamic and inspiring conversation. And I hope the audience has also found our session inspiring and also educational. Thank you very much, everyone, and have a good day.
Thank you, Norley. Thank you all. We promise to only listen to the leadership that the youth will provide, right, Norley?
Yes.
And the
Yes.
women.
And the women.
Oh,
But women
yes.
first. Yes.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.